Have you ever noticed that someone who always replies suddenly
Where did they go?
disappears for days? No texts, no calls, no explanation. Then they return as if nothing happened. Most people assume they're being rude or no longer care, but psychology points to something much deeper. What if disappearing isn't about avoiding people? What if it's about escaping what's happening inside the mind? Psychologists have observed this pattern for years, yet few people understand it. Someone can seem happy and sociable one day, then vanish the next. The reason often starts long before the silence. It builds quietly through stress, emotional pressure, and mental exhaustion until even a simple message feels overwhelming. Imagine carrying an invisible weight every day. Every notification, conversation, and expectation adds a little more. Eventually, your mind reaches its limit. Pulling away isn't always a conscious choice. Sometimes it's the brain's way of creating space when everything feels too heavy. This is why disappearing is so often misunderstood. Friends think they're being ignored. Family assumes something is wrong. But many people who disappear are struggling with themselves, not with the people they care about. They're trying to recover in silence, even if nobody else can see it. If these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing. This channel explores the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, helping you better understand yourself and others. There's always more to discover. The first reason people disappear for days has almost nothing to do with other people. It begins with something happening deep inside their own mind. Imagine waking up to several unread messages. None are urgent, yet you still don't reply. Hours turn into days, and before you realize it, you've disappeared without meaning to. Psychologists say emotional overload can make even simple tasks feel exhausting. A short reply isn't just a few words anymore. It feels like another conversation, another decision, and another responsibility. What seems easy to others can feel overwhelming to someone whose mind is already exhausted. The surprising part is that this can happen even when life looks normal. Someone may still go to work, smile, and handle daily responsibilities while feeling completely drained inside. They save their limited energy for what they must do, and personal messages are often the first thing left behind. Think of two friends after a stressful week. One reaches out for support, the other quietly disappears. They're responding to the same pressure in different ways. One finds comfort in connection, while the other finds relief in silence. So when someone disappears, it doesn't always mean they no longer care. Sometimes their mind is simply asking for a break before it can keep going. But emotional overload is only the beginning. The next reason explains why many people still don't reply even after they finally have the energy to do so. It often begins with a simple thought, "I'll reply later." At first it seems harmless, but later becomes tomorrow, then next week, until the silence feels too awkward to break. Psychologists say the longer a reply is delayed, the heavier it feels. A message that once needed a quick response now seems to require an explanation or apology. The conversation grows much bigger in the mind than it really is. Imagine a friend asking, "How have you been?" You mean to reply that evening, but forget. A few days later, you worry they'll think you ignored them. Instead of answering, you wait even longer. Ironically, every day of silence makes replying feel even harder. The surprising part is that people who disappear often think about those unanswered messages all the time. They don't forget them. They feel guilty each time they see them, but that guilt keeps them from responding. This creates a cycle where delay turns into guilt, and guilt turns into even more silence. But that's still not the deepest reason people disappear. Sometimes they're not running from people, they're trying to escape emotions they don't know how to handle. Sometimes disappearing isn't about being busy. It happens after an argument, a disappointment, or an emotionally difficult moment. While some people talk about their feelings, others quietly pull away from everyone. Psychologists believe this can be a form of emotional self-protection. When emotions become overwhelming, the brain looks for relief. For some, creating distance feels easier than explaining what they're going through. Imagine receiving bad news. Friends keep asking, "Are you okay?" Even though they mean well, answering the same question over and over feels exhausting. Instead of talking, they stop replying. Silence begins to feel safer than conversation. The surprising part is that many people don't disappear because they want to leave others behind. They disappear because they're trying to heal in private. They hope they'll return once they feel like themselves again. But silence isn't always caused by emotional pain. The next reason is different, and it comes from the pressure of believing they must show up perfectly before reaching out again. Some people don't disappear because they have nothing to say. They disappear because they're waiting for the perfect time to come back. They think, "I'll reply when I'm less stressed," or when I find the right words, but that moment rarely comes. Psychologists say perfectionism can affect relationships as much as work. A simple reply begins to feel like it needs a perfect explanation. The more pressure they put on themselves, the harder it becomes to send even a short message. Imagine forgetting a friend's birthday. You plan to apologize the next day, but then it feels too late. As more time passes, returning becomes even more uncomfortable. A small delay slowly turns into complete silence. The surprising part is that these people often care deeply. Their silence isn't caused by indifference, but by the fear of saying the wrong thing. Instead of sending an imperfect message, they send nothing at all. But these patterns usually begin much earlier than adulthood. The next reason goes back to childhood, where many people first learn to cope with emotional stress by pulling away. Many people think disappearing is just a habit, but for some, it started in childhood. The way we learn to handle emotions early in life often shapes how we deal with stress as adults. Imagine a child who always kept their feelings to themselves because asking for help didn't feel safe. Over time, their brain learned that pulling away was the best way to cope. Years later, the same pattern can appear in friendships and relationships. Psychologists believe early experiences create emotional habits. Some people seek support when life gets hard, others instinctively withdraw. When stress builds, disappearing can feel natural because it's the coping method they've used for years. The surprising part is that many people don't realize they're repeating an old pattern. They simply feel the need to step back whenever life becomes overwhelming. Understanding this doesn't excuse the silence, but it helps explain it. And the next reason is perhaps the most surprising of all. Many people who disappear actually care far more than others imagine. Many people believe that if someone disappears, they simply don't care. But psychology often shows the opposite. Some people care so much that every unanswered message stays on their mind. Imagine someone reading your text but not replying. It looks like they ignored you. In reality, they may be thinking about it for hours, worrying they'll say the wrong thing or disappoint you. Psychologists say people who are highly sensitive to others' feelings often put pressure on themselves to respond perfectly. The more they care about the relationship, the harder replying can become. The surprising part is that while others think they've forgotten, they're often carrying quiet guilt every day. That guilt keeps the cycle of silence going. So disappearing isn't always a sign that someone doesn't value the relationship. Sometimes it's a sign they're overwhelmed. But what happens when they finally return? That's where the psychology becomes even more surprising. After days or weeks of silence, they finally return, but instead of explaining where they've been, they act as if nothing happened. To others, this can feel confusing or even hurtful. Psychologists say this is often caused by shame. They worry that apologizing will make the situation even more awkward, so they choose the easier path, starting a normal conversation and hoping the silence is left behind. Imagine disappearing for a week, then sending a simple, "Hey, how are you?" It isn't always because you don't care. Sometimes it's because you don't know how to explain your absence. The surprising part is that many people feel relieved when the other person responds kindly. It feels like a second chance they never expected. Once you understand this pattern, disappearing begins to look less like rejection and more like a hidden struggle. And that realization changes the way we see both ourselves and the people around us. Once you understand this psychology, silence looks different. Not everyone disappears because they don't care. Sometimes it's emotional exhaustion, guilt, or a coping habit. Others may truly lose interest, but you can't always tell from silence alone. That doesn't make the pain any less real. Being left without an explanation hurts. Understanding the behavior doesn't mean excusing it. If you saw yourself in this video, your silence may not be a flaw. It may be a pattern your mind learned over time. Sometimes the biggest change begins with understanding yourself. If this video gave you a new perspective, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to explore more hidden patterns of human behavior, consider subscribing for future videos.